This is my video for my final project in computer science, recreating the game Bomberman using processing network libraries. So I think the screens are a little small in the camera, but I'll try to explain what it is and give a close-up. So the first thing you have to do is there's two programs. There's the server program, which is the one on the right here, and then there's the client programs, which are here and here on the second computer. And so the server has to be turned on, and then when you turn on the server and connect the clients to it by typing in the IP address, you're able to connect and play the game across a network on two different computers. This is a different computer than this one. And the server can run on a separate computer from the other two. I just don't have it here. And it can be played up to 4 players. So the first thing you have to do is start the server by running this sketch over here for the server. And so the first thing you may hear is that there's a song. I'm just going to turn that off so I can speak, but there is music in the background. And so in order to connect the clients, what you do is on each computer, so I'm going to start with the one up at the top, you launch both programs, and it asks you in the 2 text boxes for the IP address of the server. So on the server computer, I get the IP address, at least on Windows, by going to the CMD and typing in ipconfig. And so this brings up a whole list of stuff. And if you find the IPv4 address, which is the IP address of the computer, and type that into each box and hit submit, then it'll connect the clients. So the IP address of this server is 192.168.1.156. And if I hit submit, it should go black, and that's waiting for the next player to connect. So now on the separate computer, I'm going to type in the same IP address, 192.168.1. Oops, didn't click. Oh no, wrong keyboard. 192.168.1.156. And then if I hit submit, it connects. So now you'll see that there's 3 different windows here. The one on the right over here is the server, and the server is just a mirror image of the 2 clients. So here's client 1, and here's client 2. And so how the game works is using the arrow keys, each client can move around, and so you might not be able to see it, but I'm moving the arrow keys on the keyboard here to move the client up and down, left and right. And then to place a bomb to explode the different terrain, you press the Z key, and then the bomb explodes in a plus formation. And so it explodes the terrain, and the goal of the game is to get to the other player and kill them. So this also works on this upper client up here. So if I do the same thing, and this is running the same piece of code as the first client, it just gets sent different data from the server, and it sends back its own moves. So I can move with that as well on the second keyboard for the second computer, and press Z to explode the bombs. And so the bombs flash as they're going a few times, and then they explode with that pattern, and there is actually a sound for the explosions. So the music might sound a little weird. That's because the server and the client are both playing the sounds, but you should have heard the sound for the explosion. And so what happens is, if I press Z and say, kill myself in this screen, that person's going to die, and it might be hard to see, you'll see that it tells everyone that the game's over and that who wins. So it keeps track of who wins the game, and the game's over, and then if you want to restart, you just click on the server, and the game restarts with a fresh map. And so how I generated these maps is I used a Perl noise value, and I kept messing around with it until I got about the right amount of rocks I wanted. And you can see that these Perl noise values create different lines, so there's a line there, or like gaps there, and it makes a much better map than just before when I randomly generated it, and there would be like 1 rock here, and then like 3 rocks there, and it would be all over the place. So it makes a much more interesting map to play, because now people can move around, and it's not just rocks along the way. So that's pretty much the basis of the game. There's not much more to the game. But how I did this, so in my code, let me just get to the code now. So there's a server and a client, so there's 2 separate processing sketches. The server sketch is the one that keeps track of all the data and makes all the calculations, and the client just receives it, displays it on the screen, and then sends movement data. So how it works is using the processing network library, And what you do in the processing network library, and I can try to get up closer if I can move my camera without ruining everything. It's a little closer. So how it works is over here, and actually, I'll make this full screen. I don't know if you can make the size of the font bigger. Edit. I don't know. But, so how it works is that there's a line of code right over, let me just find it. Oh, right here. So this line of code here says S equals new server, and then you name the server and you give it a port number. And so that's the port number that you find it on with all the clients. And any client connected, I think, anywhere on this network is able to put in the IP address of this computer, which is the one the server's running on, and it's able to connect as long as it uses the port, which I have as 12345. So then if I go over to the client now, and I do something similar, and I make a new client, so the client over here, so the client waits for the text box, which I use Control P5 to make the text boxes work. And so how the client works is that you type something in similarly, but instead of just typing in the port number, you also have to type in the IP address. So right here, it says C equals new client this.ip address 12345, and the IP address is a variable gotten from the text box, and that connects the clients, and that's the basis for everything. Because once that happens, the server is able to send individual commands to each computer, and it sends this computer a certain number, which correlates to which player this one's controlling, so that when this computer client sends back to the server, when it sends back its information to the server figures out which computer it is, and then knows which player to move or which bomb to place. And it's a different one for the other computer that I had on before. That gets a different number. But the data sent from the server, which is what's to display on the screen, will be sent to everything, but the data received from the clients will be different for each client. And you do that with like a basic, you pretty much send strings back and forth between the two. And so the strings here, I don't know where they are exactly because there's a bunch of different ways, but how I worked around sending strings is that I only set numbers, and I use different codes for each different thing that happens. So for instance, if I want to move right, there's a code for moving, and it'll be some number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll say maybe the direction and X and Y coordinates, so 1, 1, and I'll send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, space 1, space 1. And then I'll put the player number, so maybe this is player 3, so I'll hit space 3. And then the server will decode each number based on the spaces, and it'll be able to, oops, this fell, and it'll be able to figure out which player did what, and it'll interpret the data to do all the calculations. And so only the server is doing calculations. So before, when I was trying to have the clients do the calculations of, say, it moved and then move the player and send it back to the server that it's moved, and display it on the computer without checking with the server, if things got out of sync, they would end up being multiple players or other stuff, because the server would think the player's one place, and the client would think it's another place. So now, it only is the server which does it, which I believe is how many video games in real life do it, where they only have the server doing all the calculations, but they have the clients displaying stuff. And so, just one more thing. So I used the Control P5. I used Control P5 for the library for the text box, and I used a separate library for the music, which I think is called Minimum. And so, the one thing about that is, I was planning on exporting this using the processing export to application. However, exporting doesn't really work with Control P5, and in order to put in the IP address without modifying the code, I need a text box. So if I had more time, I could have made my own text box, and then I would have been able to export it to an application. But instead, I can't. And I think that's everything. If you have any questions, you can email me. If the Trinity email even works, I don't know. Otherwise, have a great summer. Thanks, Eli.